black vote right there. That's what's going on in Tennessee right now. At least 2 black lawmakers arrested for their opposition against the white state legislators eliminating black representation in the Tennessee legislature. Then we saw over here, take a look right here is what was going down as Democrats were burning the Confederate flag. And you'll see what goes down over here. Play this clip. Now I got to bring you to this speech of Justin Pearson. It was an incredible speech. Let's play it.
Minutes.
These maps are racist tools of white supremacy at the behest of the most powerful white supremacist in the United States of America, Donald J. Trump. Memphis is the most beautiful place on the planet. It's the place that raised me, my brothers, my parents, my grandmothers, and where my ancestors' bones rest. And what you are doing today is eviscerating the only black majority congressional district in our state because we are majority black. We are here because this Republican Party has to seek to steal elections and seats, because the president and the party have refused to address the pain, the suffering, and the struggling of everyday Tennesseans. This is about attacking, targeting, and cracking District 9 into pieces for more political and racial dominance and white supremacy in the state of Tennessee. And we need to realize that the Calais decision that you all are basing your decisions off of, that gutted the Voting Rights Act, that Voting Rights Act was paid in blood. It was not just a parchment of paper signed into law. It was paid in blood on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Paid in blood by Medgar Evers, paid in blood by Fannie Lou Hamer. It's been paid in blood year over year, time after time, assassination after assassination, lynching after lynching, so that more people might be able to ascertain access to this constitutional democratic republic experiment that is currently being gutted and seeking to be gutted by this chamber, by this House, this Senate, and this state. What is happening here is immoral and wrong. And I was reading my Bible early this morning, asking God why this is happening. Why, again, does it seem that white supremacy is seeming to gain? Why, again, does it seem like the pillars of pain that we have felt and experienced for over 400 years in this country continue to rise again? And whispered in the words of this Bible and in the words of those ancestors that have gone before us is just these simple words: we're still here.
You don't know what an AI work management platform is? Yikes. Here's 3 new AI-powered changes to the
Here. We are still here. This nation, this state has legislated and legalized the worst things in humanity, including our enslavement, and we are still here. Right in this country where, as one black woman said, your ancestors enslaved us, denied us of our rights, called us 3/5 of a person, and yet we are still here. You put us on cotton plantations and tobacco plantations. You denied our human rights and our right to exist as children of God, and we are still here. You destroyed Tulsa. You killed and lynched black folks on poplar trees. Shelby County, Tennessee had the most lynchings of anywhere in this state where you're taking this district, and we are still here. You've had 3 strikes laws, mass incarceration, denied us of who we are, and we are still here. And today you'll take the only majority black district from us. But I want you to know, and I want my nephew, sons, and the future to know, no matter what you do, No matter how much you try and break us and make us bend and make us quit, we will still be here.
As California Governor Gavin Newsom says, so there's no referendum, no public vote in Tennessee. The legislature just takes away people's vote. They pick up a GOP seat. No vote in Florida, just the state legislature changes the congressional maps. Republicans
First of all, thank you to the Midas Touch and Ben Masalas for being there to cover the Tennessee State House representatives' response to the Supreme Court's decision to gut the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and then for the Tennessee legislature to move to quickly gerrymander the voting districts to eliminate and or seriously dilute the voice of the African American citizenry in that state. I have to first just give a shout out to the two Justins, Representative Justin Jones, who you saw put a small torch to a replica of the Confederate flag that burned fairly quickly, so he had to toss it to the ground and stomp it out. And then to Representative Justin Pearson, who followed up with a brilliant speech that included a walk through the bloody history of African Americans' path to the voting booth in America. I would just like to share with you just a little bit of the history. The Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965. And here is what the AI Google version says about it. The Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965 to add the protections of the 15th Amendment. It is a landmark U.S. federal statute that prohibits racial discrimination in voting. It was signed into law by President James Johnson during the height of the Civil Rights Movement. Congress would later amend the act 5 times to expand its protections. The 15th Amendment, which the Voting Rights Act was passed to support, the 15th Amendment was passed several years after the end of the Civil War to guarantee no discrimination based on race when people took their turn to vote. It was intended to protect the newly freed slaves and give them an opportunity to be heard as now all of the other citizens of the country. However, that was 1870, the 15th Amendment. So you might wonder, well, why did we need a Voting Rights Act of 1965? We needed it because African Americans, though the 15th Amendment existed, were tortured, intimidated, threatened if they tried to vote. The history notes that some African Americans still lived on the master's land immediately following the Civil War. And if they tried to vote, once they returned to home, they would often be escorted off the property. All of this is available through Google. And you know, I always tell you, if I say anything in here that you question, you have not heard before, I would love for you to Google it, search it out for yourself. I certainly am not, the last voice or source for you. I want you to learn on your own. I want you to be curious enough about this history that you will begin to see it as an important part of what you do in your life. If you don't feel up to doing it, maybe someone else in your family, maybe your children, maybe your grandchildren. But understand, as the saying goes, if you do not do politics, politics will do you. Because right now, you may not have done anything since the last time you voted, but guess what? Things have changed. So the next time you get ready to vote, depending on what state you live in, there may be new rules about the identifications that you will need to vote. There might be new voting places. You might be in a new district. Because just as quickly as the Supreme Court gutted the 1965 Voting Rights Act, these Republican legislators began quickly to gerrymander the districts to exclude or seriously dilute the Black vote. This is the reality in 2026. As a student of history, I remember reading about Reconstruction, and there were times when Black people served in the legislature even after slavery ended. And I often wondered, well, how did it get turned back? How did they let that power slip through? I was not taught the answers to those questions in high school or in college. And I have a couple of college degrees. But this information I learned because I searched it out on my own. The reason that a 1965 Voting Rights Act was needed, as I said, because Blacks were threatened, sometimes killed. We have in our history books, in our history, not your history books, not mainstream history books, but we have the story of 3 civil rights leaders who were murdered. They came down from the north to Mississippi to help register Mississippi African Americans to vote. They were targeted and killed. And it took a whole FBI investigation to find out that the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, was behind their murders, aided and abetted by many members of law enforcement and public officials. Our history is filled with the blood, sweat, and tears of our ancestors as we try to exercise a right and a privilege that is guaranteed to all other Americans. So when the Supreme Court, in its wisdom, decided at the end of April to gut the Voting Rights Act, they took something from us that we paid blood for. Of course, Dr. King was still alive when the Civil Rights Act was passed in 1964. Guess who signed it into law? Lyndon Baines Johnson. Guess who signed the Voting Rights Act into law? Lyndon Baines Johnson. When Dr. King, Reverend Andrew Young, Reverend Jesse Jackson, Reverend Ralph Abernathy, when they began that road to the vote, John F. Kennedy Jr. was the president. But guess what happened? There were many in the deep, deep South. You will recall that he was shot and killed. President Kennedy assassinated in the backseat of a car in Texas, deep South, while his beautiful wife, Jacqueline Bouvier Kennedy, sat in the back seat. And it is said that one of the bullets went through his neck and the other to his head, and that the blood and the brain splattered upon her. And if you go back and look at the film, you can see her crawling out of the back of that car. This is the blood that was spilled in the civil rights movement. It cost a lot. Freedom is not free. No one knows that better in this country than African Americans. And so it is reported that the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court has always had a dream. His dream is different from the American dream that we are taught to love and aspire to. As a young lawyer hired to work in the Reagan administration, he had a dream to get rid of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It is reported that this was a major goal of his in his career. And a couple of weeks ago, when the Louisiana Vs Calais case was heard in the Supreme Court, and they made that devastating ruling, Some said that he had finally achieved what he had worked on for 40-something years. But we have worked on our freedom for 400 plus years. I don't know if he knows African American history. Of course, there's another justice who must be given his due for supporting this ruling, for being in the majority, voting to gut the Voting Rights Act. And that would be our very own Justice Clarence Thomas. Now, I remember when Justice Thomas was nominated to the court. I think it was George H.W. Bush, the father, who nominated him. And it was because a veteran defender of African American rights, Thurgood Marshall, had passed away, ending his lifelong term on the Supreme Court. And as often happens, I guess it was amusing to someone somewhere that they would replace someone like Thurgood Marshall, a Black man who fought so hard for all of the rights to be extended to Blacks in this country, to replace him with a Clarence Thomas who seems to bend over backwards to vote for anything that reverses the gains of African Americans in this country. I hope that some of our young people will study Justice Thomas, investigate his life. Why does he vote this way? Why is it okay with him to go against everything that helped him to get on the court as an African American? I wish that some of our young people would do a psychological deep dive into him and share that with our people. Of course, if anyone else wants to understand this person, share that. It's open for them too. But I mean, we need to understand a person like that. We know that we have Kanye, but then Kanye does not have a lifetime appointment that is as serious as the position that Justice Thomas has. We know about Candace Owens. We wonder about them too. We wonder about them psychologically. Like, how do you reconcile the things you say and do against the progress of African Americans when you walk around in the skin every day and you know the plight of the majority of the people who share this skin color, who share this experience in America? Because to me, Clarence Thomas was a puzzle when Anita Hill made her claims about him. And the great Charles Ogletree defended her. She also was is a brilliant lawyer, working at that time in the EEOC. I think it was Equal Employment Office, the EEOC with Clarence Thomas, which he was heading. And she accused him of some misconduct. She was the top attorney at the top of her game at that time, and Clarence Thomas was apparently at the top of his game. Go back and take a look at the hearings. You will learn a lot about Justice Thomas. And there's a wonderful documentary on Anita Hill's life that will shed some light not only on Justice Thomas, but on his wife. And that's all I'll say about that. This Supreme Court ruling stands to affect now the outcome of the midterm elections. It is widely reported that because of Donald Trump's very low standing with the public right now, that the Republicans could very easily lose their majority in the House of Representatives and perhaps even in the Senate. And many people say it is the fear of that happening that has driven this Supreme Court ruling and all of this cheating, which you just saw in the Tennessee House. It's cheating. It's cheating if you say that African Americans have the right to vote, and then we all go abide by the rules, go get registered, and then in the middle of the game, which is what has happened to African Americans in this country a lot. We enter the game, we learn the rules, we play by the rules, we win. We win again. We win again. We win again. Barack Obama becomes president twice with his beautiful First Lady and his lovely daughters. And someone somewhere said, it seems, never again. And so the rules began to be changed. Now, your driver's license, which I have used to register to vote now since I've been voting. That's 20 plus years I've used my driver's license to vote. This next election, the midterms, the rules are different. Your driver's license may not be enough. You may need a birth certificate. You may need a passport. Just the fact that you don't know what you need, that you have to do some research, is enough to turn some people back and not away to the poll, to the voting booth. Because some people don't have time to search out to do that research. Well, where's my new voting place? Well, I need to get a passport. I don't have $150 for a passport. That's enough to pay my light bill. if I get $150, it's going to go to my car insurance. It's not going to go to getting a passport. I don't have any plans to go out of the country. You see, back in the day, what these people used, the KKK and their ilk, what they used to keep Black people from voting. They didn't want to dilute the vote. They just didn't want Black people to vote. So they would make up these silly asinine tests. When you got up enough courage to go to the poll, they would ask you, how many jelly beans are in this jar? You're standing there, you're looking at a jar of jelly beans. How do you know? No way to know the answer to that. How many bubbles are in this bar of soap? You see, that's cheating. That is, I entered the game, I learned the rules. First of all, you blocked my entry into the game for 200-300 years. But I entered the game, I learned the rules, I play by the rules, I win, I win, I win. I heard a report that right after the Civil War, there was something, before the Voting Rights Act, there was like 72 Black people serving in public office across this nation. But after the Voting Rights Act, that number shot up to 10,000. Okay? Voting matters. But again, why target so fiercely the African American vote? What are you so afraid of? Instead of adapting your policies, you know, you got rid of diversity, equity, and inclusion. You banned so many of our books. You wiped our history from important websites in the government. You fired many of our military, top military generals, African American and female. 300,000 Black women who were federal workers and other workers contracted maybe with the government lost their jobs once this administration took office. So we know that you are targeting us. We're very clear on that. It feels like you want a confrontation with African Americans. You're already in a forever war with Iran, which is illegal and unconstitutional, according to reports. Why do you want to pick a fight with the large segment of your population, African Americans? Who have already fought this fight? Many people say that the fear that Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth and J.D. Vance and Stephen Miller and those under that umbrella of MAGA, the fear is in the numbers. The numbers say that in a few years, Caucasians will not be the majority population in this country. They will become a minority group. And it is speculated that this is driving what appears to be just acts of illegality, certainly of unconstitutionality. Because they fear that this administration, if the Democrats take the House or take the Senate, or if they take both, this administration will be called to task. They will have to answer for some of the policies that they have instituted, for their authoritarian behavior with the ICE agents in Massachusetts that killed 2 American citizens, that they will have to answer for that. And we believe that this could be a part of what is driving them. Because why else would you target a particular group? They say there is some fear that should they ever become a minority group, they fear that what they have done to other minority groups, that those groups may do the same to them. I offer them this argument in response to that. African Americans have never lynched Caucasians. African Americans have never bombed white churches. African Americans have never blocked you from voting. We have never taken your babies and tossed them to alligators as gator bait, Florida, and alligator Alcatraz. Do your research. Our history, the history of African Americans in America, is not a history of violence, although we get that tag. But guess who we get it from? We get that tag from the people who have delivered the most violence toward us. They say past is prologue. Past is prologue. You can look at what folks have done in the past to sort of gauge what they may do in the future. We have never done this kind of thing. Again, we have never lynched people. This is important. We have never blocked you from voting. We have never kept you out of educational systems. We have never had you go sit in a church where you are just worshiping and blow it up. African Americans have been in Bible study and a young white man came in with a gun and just shot people up. We have never done that. You don't have that. If you have that history on African Americans, present it. But we know the answer. If you had it, it would be in the history books. It would be spattered across the news. But you don't have it. It does not exist. I would like to suggest that you find a new target. That you might consider that we have spilled enough blood for this democracy. Our young generation, they are not interested in being water hosed, have dogs sit on them while they sing freedom songs. They are not interested in going back into the tobacco fields, the cotton fields, any of your fields. It's a new day in Black America. You might not meet the same nonviolence that you met in the past if you continue along this path. For all of you who swear that you are Christians, you know that scripture. God is not mocked. You reap what you sow. This is violence perpetrated against African Americans when you try to take back our voting rights. This is violence. Okay? Look up the word violence. This is violence. If you sow violence, God has blessed this country. This country has not seen a battle on this soil since the Civil War. We were attacked at 9/11, but the fight wasn't fought on this soil. But what's up? Are you egging for a fight on this soil with African Americans? You should consider this people who appears always to be alone, but who believes fiercely in God. And we know that our ancestors' blood is in this soil. In the trees. Our wonderful Billie Holiday had that song, Strange Fruit, because when she traveled through the South, coming to sing for you, she would see bodies hanging from the trees. Strange fruit. I would like to suggest to you that African Americans have paid enough. And as young Justin Pearson said, we are still here. And I like the way that one of my favorite online podcasters, Reese Waters, put it. He puts it in Ebonics. We still here. Okay, after all you've done, that should give you some pause. That should give you some pause. We look like we're alone. We have the ancestors behind us, and we have the spirit of the living God. That's what you're up against, because you took people from their own land. You brought them here. That's Africans in America. That's us. You brought this upon yourselves. You wanted the free labor. Now you want to kill, dismiss, deport. Let Stephen Miller fill in the blank. But you want all these people who have built this country with you to disappear. Poof. They don't share any, you don't want them to share in any of the proceeds. What nerve. The audacity. The audacity. So I think that you should consider that there's a reason why we're still here. There's a reason why we're still here. We are like that personification of every time you try to tell that American story. You know how you're telling that wonderful story about your life. Oh, you got it all written down. It's 250 years. We're about to celebrate this democracy. And here steps in the African Americans. We don't have to say a word. We don't have to say a word. You can look at our skin color, and you can look at the color of Africans who just came out of Africa. And you can see the effects of the plantation that you have never had to pay for. Rape of slave women. You have never had to pay for. Be careful. And I'll leave that right there. Be careful. You're messing with God's people. And God don't play about us. God does not play about us. Okay? So I'm gonna wrap that up right there. And I would just urge all of my listeners to prepare yourselves for the midterms. Find out what has changed, particularly if you are a student or if you are a woman who has married and your last name has changed. You need to make sure your documents match. Okay? There are some places where you may not need a passport if you've always lived in a place and the people know you, because some of this will play out locally, and those people will not harass you, because those people who work at those polls are just honest, good citizens trying to help facilitate the vote. And they know if you show your driver's license and you show your light bill or something and you live at that address, they know that's you. And they're not going to harass you. Okay, so, but you need to find out what the rules are in your voting precinct. And you need to find out, has my voting precinct changed? Am I a part of this gerrymandering? Did my district change? Especially if you're any of these states that are hotbeds right now for this GOP attack. Get your own voting house in order, because your vote this time around is going to matter perhaps more than it ever has. Some people are saying, vote like your life depends upon it, because it does. Especially for African Americans. So get your paperwork together and find out where you're supposed to vote early enough. Don't procrastinate. And then tell your friends to do the same thing. If you have elderly people in your family, help them to get it done. We need all hands on deck. And when I say that, there are many of us who are about to go and protest now. We're about to hit the streets. Many, many people will be doing that because they just feel that it is necessary now. That it's necessary. So make sure that you're ready. Make sure that your family is safe. You know, protect your family. Have a plan B if anything crazy happens in your neighborhood. Who will you call? Where will you go? What would you do? Basic safety type stuff. I don't think anything that ridiculous will happen, but we never know in this climate. Already they're saying that Donald Trump may send the military to the voting booths, to the precincts, to just stand guard and make sure who knows what. But that's going to be quite intimidating for people, especially if they're armed and masked up like that. You know, they're known to wear their mask. So be prepared for that too. and stay prayed up. Prayer changes things. I know in this climate, when you say pray, some people say, well, we need to do more than that. Absolutely. God never said just pray. He said, watch and pray. There's a reason that the word of the Lord says, watch and pray. You see, he wants you to know what's up. Watch and pray is just a biblical way of saying, stay woke or stay ready. Stay ready and you don't have to get ready. Okay? Save yourself some time and stay ready. So that's going to wrap it up for us at Faith, Family, and Political Affairs. I hope that you have learned something from this video. You know that is always my goal. But please do this, especially for the young people, your assignment. Find out everything you can find out about Justice John Roberts, about Justice Clarence Thomas, and anyone else on that court. We will be looking for the Democratic Party, should they take the House back and or the Senate. We will be looking for them to start immediately trying to reform the Supreme Court. There are three goals that I have heard many African American leaders espouse, and I certainly 100% agree. First of all, that court needs to be expanded. Okay, there needs to be maybe 12, but that number there is too small, and it's very easily a majority can be reached by one party. And again, these appointments are for life. So if you have a court that's skewed and they are behaving like the Klan, you may be stuck with them for your life, for your lifetime, and no telling what kind of havoc they can wreak on your life, your children's life, your grandchildren's life. That's the extent of a Supreme Court. So one, we would like to see an expansion of the number of justices. Number two, we would like to see a limit to the terms that they can serve, their tenure. We don't want it to be lifetime anymore, that they get on the court and they can stay until the Lord calls them home. Because some of them may be suffering from dementia, or we might discover that some of them are just racist, as we have discovered in this case, that this person has intended to get rid of the Voting Rights Act since, for 40 some years. I listened to a lot of newscasts on Sunday. I didn't hear anybody say this is cheating. I didn't hear anybody say that John Roberts, that's racist. But we don't need these words anymore. When people show you who they are, believe them the first time. From our great matriarch, Maya Angelou. When people show you who they are, believe them the first time. We have seen who Justice John Roberts is. We don't need him to say anything else. Okay? And the third thing that we would like to see the Democratic Party do immediately with the Supreme Court is to codify some kind of ethics rule, something that will say you can't take monetary gifts, votes, money. I said monetary. You can't take stocks. You just can't continue to take all these gifts from people who are then coming to you to affect the way you rule on a court case that's coming before the Supreme Court. They must have some ethics. It is reported that all of the other judicial systems The state Supreme Court, certainly the lawyers have to operate ethically by a set of ethics. Why shouldn't the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, also have to operate by some ethics rules? So those are our three things that we would love to see the Democratic Party push for, should they. And move with haste. One thing that the Project 2025 people did that you must say is impressive. They got everything done pretty much in the first year, certainly in the first year and a half that's in that Project 2025. Just go back and check it out. So the Democrats, we need to move the same way when we get control of the House. And as Representative Green, Al Green out of Texas, don't ever, ever, ever rule out impeachment. Of the 47th president of these United States. That is still doable, especially in light of the unforeseen information yet to be revealed in the Epstein files. Okay, thank you for tuning in. This has been another edition of Faith, Family, and Political Affairs. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time. God bless.